Good morning, Dan and Amy. And yesterday, Steve Moore, hometown, the North Shore, well, homeboy of the North Shore, but now a Virginia Dennison, he failed us. He failed to beat back even Democrat socialists who were elected to the Virginia House of Delegates, for goodness sakes, much less the Democrat Party takeover of the state of Virginia. And how does that impact the politics on the Hill for tax reform? For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Steve Moore, who owes the nation an apology.
Good morning, guys. Well, actually, I don't live in Virginia anymore. I've moved to Maryland. So, that's how bad things have gotten in Virginia.
You moved to Maryland?
I live in Potomac now. But I would not read too much into this, because if you go back the last 50 years, every 90% of the time, the party that is in power of the White House loses the Republican governorship. The only time that happened was with Terry McAuliffe, who was the governor this time around. And it's a protest vote against the party that's in power. And so I wasn't too surprised. He's a good friend of mine. I think he would have been a great governor, and I was disappointed he didn't win the race. But he was up against a powerful tide.
That's it. And it seems to me it's something that maybe will chasten House and Senate Republicans to move the flag on big promises, because it's one thing to talk about the governor's race. It's another thing to talk about going from a supermajority in the Virginia House of Delegates for Republicans to, it looks like, a minority position.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen those down results yet, so I don't know. They haven't finished counting the ballots on this, but you're right. I mean, look, it was a wipeout of the Republicans, and Virginia has turned into a very red, I wouldn't say a very blue, but it's a blue state now. And the reason is I was looking at the map. I mean, what happened in Northern Virginia, which is the Washington, D.C. area, is so blue now. I mean, it's, so blue. Fairfax County, where I used to live, voted 2-1, 66% for the Democrats. And that's because they're all government bureaucrats and government contractors and K Street lobbyists that don't want smaller government. They don't want to drain the swamp, folks. So it's not too surprising that Virginia, which is probably in the swamp, is opposed to what Trump is trying to do. Now, the implications for Congress, which is the real question of the day, I think, is you better get this thing done. You better get this tax cut done, or you're going to get wiped out in 2018, just like the Republicans did in Virginia. You got to deliver something to the voters, and so far they haven't.
Well, before, I would just want to ask you one question about Gillespie. Do you think if he campaigned with President Trump, that would have helped him? Because he kept him, he did not campaign with him at all. And Gillespie, he wanted to keep Confederate monuments. He wanted to, prevent the emergence of sanctuary cities in his state. I thought that
so did Northam.
Yeah. So, I mean, why do you think that hurt him?
Look, I think a little bit.
Steve,
in liberal areas. And so, I think that Trump, Gillespie had a tough, he was trying to thread a needle of saying, well, I'm like Trump, but I don't like Trump, and that kind of thing, and it just didn't work. And in very liberal areas, Trump is very unpopular. I looked at on the statues issue. I used to live in Virginia. I lived there for 25 years. Most of the people I know were like, why do they want to take down these statues? These are part of our heritage as a state. Stonewall Jackson. I don't know. I think there was just people who were angry at Trump, and I think it hurt Gillespie a lot.
Talking about the tax plan, so they have this big rollout last Thursday, and then they immediately start to dilute it from there with reports coming out about changes in the House and senators, including some pretty strong senators when it comes to conservative reform bona fides, like Ron Johnson, being critical about parts of it, like the rate for pass-through income. And so where does this stand right now? How optimistic are you about something on the order of what we need actually coming to fruition?
Now, first of all, the heart and soul of the tax plan is clearly the business tax rate reductions. The corporate rate is so out of line with the rest of the world. It makes America so uncompetitive in terms of, competing with Japan or Germany or China or Mexico or Australia that it has to be fixed. It's just we bleed jobs and we bleed factories because of it. And this would bring the United States corporate rate down from the highest in the world to below average, and that would attract a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs and factories back to the United States. It's like a reverse magnetic pull. That's by far the best feature of this tax plan. It does provide some relief for small businesses. Don't ask me to explain it, Dan, because it is so convoluted. You're going to need an army of tax lawyers to figure it out. I think they've made that way too complicated, but it does lower rates for pass-through small businesses. And then, look, the average individual is going to save, if you make between $60,000 and $100,000 a couple, and, in Illinois, that's a school teacher married to an accountant. You're gonna save about $2,500 to $3,000 in your taxes. The irony of all this is the left is out there screaming tax cuts for the rich, tax cuts for the rich. And I got to tell you, I've talked to a lot of Heritage Foundation donors who are successful businessmen. Many of them are millionaires. They say, look, I'm looking at this plan, and I'm going to pay more,
right,
not less under this plan. So this idea that this is a giant giveaway from the rich, that is absolutely not true.
Well, can you
especially unfortunately, if you live in Illinois or New York or California or New Jersey or Connecticut.
Word this morning that the GOP tax plan is going to make your divorce more expensive. Can you explain that?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Oh, that to pay for tax cuts, the House plan would repeal alimony deduction.
Well, yeah, I mean, so all of the deductions.
Wait. It would do what?
Alimony deduction. All the deductions, the limits on tuition debt, mortgage interest, alimony, medical expenses, SALT, gambling losses, tax prep expenses. All of those deductions that are targeted in some form or fashion.
Well, look, I am divorced. I do pay alimony. If I lose when I give money to my ex-wife in alimony, I get a deduction, but she claims that she has to claim that as income. So I don't really even get what are they going to do? Double tax it? They're going to tax me on it, and they're going to tax her on it. I have to look at that one, Amy, because I have not heard that.
Yeah, but the larger issue of all of the deductions that have been targeted, including the sacred mortgage interest deduction, isn't it good economics, even if it's difficult politics, to simplify the code by getting rid of most of these deductions, if not all of them?
Here's the problem, Dan. I mean, I give the Republican plan the grade of a B. I think it's a good plan. It's a great plan. No. Here's what they should have done. They should have just capped the deduction. Say you can get up to, say, $150,000 of deductions per year. Now, for those of us who are just mere mortals, who are middle class or upper middle class, we don't come close to $150,000. You have to be making $800, $900, $1 million a year to have that much in deductions. And so what they ought to have done is just capped it and said, this is your basket. You can take any deductions you want up to this amount. What that would have effectively done was eliminated all deductions for people who make over $1 million, because those are people. I mean, the billionaires are taking millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars of deduction. And then this was the original Trump plan, and then lower the rate on, the people in the highest income bracket from, let's say, 40% down to 34, 35%. And that should have been the deal. We're going to take away your deductions, but we're going to give you a lower rate. Instead, what they've done, Dan, and this is what, people who I do know who are millionaires are complaining, they're like, you're taking away my deduction, and you're not giving me a lower tax rate.
Yeah, right. And my effective tax rate is going to go up by 5
so
points.
They should have brought that. And here's the irony of this: they didn't do that as we did in the original Trump plan. Liberals would accuse them of tax cuts for the rich. Well, what are they doing? They're still accusing Republicans of tax cuts for the rich. So they didn't buy any peace from the liberals there.
All right. So is this going to be done before the Christmas break or the holiday break?
That's a great question. I believe, Amy, are you going to put me on the spot here? Or?
Yeah. I mean, Paul Ryan said we're going to cancel Christmas if we don't get it done. Everyone's staying in Washington.
No.
I believe that they will. I think that the odds are that they will get this done literally on December 23rd, and I think that Trump is going to have a bill signing ceremony on December 24th. I believe the bill will be approved. Goes through this sausage making process, and we will have a pretty good tax cut delivered at Dan's door on Christmas Eve. And
it'll be the best Christmas ever.
There you go. I love that. Keep that positive mental attitude, okay?
All right. Last question before I let you jump. Have to tackle this because I think this is long overdue. This Wall Street Journal editorial that tees up Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, who has been rather pathetic in my estimation, as the Journal delineates, ducking every fight on rates, the Federal Reserve, bank regulation, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and now Koskinen, of all people, this ghoul, the outgoing IRS commissioner, who announced yesterday that for the first time, the IRS is beginning to enforce the Obamacare employer mandate, issuing thousands of penalty letters to non-compliant companies, firms with more than 50 employees that have failed to provide what Obamacare defines as qualifying coverage for its workers. These letters reach back to 2015, setting up companies for years of penalty. Nice out-the-door Christmas present from Koskinen, Steve Moore.
Yeah, isn't it? And what we ought to do is we ought to eliminate the individual mandate under Obamacare, because guess what? If you eliminate the requirement that you have to buy health insurance, and if you then get the then get to be able to buy the Obamacare or not, it actually saves the government hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years, right? So it saves taxpayers money because they don't have to pay this stupid fine. It saves the government money. And what a better way to pay for tax cuts than get rid of the individual mandate? So write that one down, Dan. For one, we help pay for tax cuts, and we rid of one of the most onerous tax. And by the way, guess who gets affected? Guess what income group is most negatively affected by the individual mandate?
Middle-income families.
Low income and middle income people. So let's get rid of that tax. But look, I like Mnuchin, and I will judge Mnuchin on whether he is able to deliver this tax cut by Christmas.
Yeah, well, start slapping him around on these other topics too, and tell him to stop being such a weenie.
Well,
Steve Moore.
I've been so focused on the tax cut, I can't really comment on the other things. But he's been good on the tax plan.
Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, senior economist for CNN, chief economist at Heritage Foundation. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Have a great week. Bye.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show. More Chicago